I heard he's a bootlegger.
One time, he killed a man who found out that he was nephew to von Hindenburg and second cousin to the devil.
Morning, old sport. I figured since we were going to lunch today, we could ride up together. Pretty, isn't it? Haven't you seen anything like it before? Look here, old sport. What's your opinion of me anyhow? Well, I'm gonna tell you something about my life. I don't want you to get a wrong idea from anything that you hear. I'll tell you God's truth. I'm the son of some wealthy people in the Middle West. Sadly, all dead now. I was brought up in America, but I educated at Oxford. All of my ancestors have been educated there for many years. It's a family tradition.
Ah, I see.
I lived like a young Raja, collecting precious gems, chiefly rubies, hunting large game and trying to forget a tragic event in my past. I joined the army when the war began, and I did try very hard to die, old sport. In the Argonne Forest, I displayed such bravery that I was awarded commendation from every major allied country, even little Montenegro.
Major J. Gatsby, for valor extraordinary.
And here, look at this souvenir from my Oxford days. The man on the left is the Earl of Dorchester. You see, old sport, I'm going to make a rather large request of you today, and I don't want you to think that I'm just some nobody.
A request? When will I find out? At lunch?
I discovered that you're taking Miss Baker to tea. She'll fill you in then. All right, old sport.
Right you are. I'll know you next time, Mr. Gatsby.
What was that, Gatsby? The picture from Oxford?
Oh, nothing. I was able to do the commissioner a favor once, and he sends me a Christmas card every year.
Anything can happen now that we've slid over this bridge. Anything at all. Even Gatsby could happen.
Wolfsheim is my good friend, Nick Carraway.
Mr. Carraway, I understand that we have a negotiation.
Oh, no. This is not the man.
My apologies, Mr. Carraway. I had the wrong man.
Oh, excuse me.
Fine fellow, Mr. Gatsby. He's handsome to look at, and he's a perfect gentleman. You know, he's an Oxford man.
I've heard of it.
He's the kind of man who would never look at another friend's wife. Well, I've overstayed my welcome. Goodbye.
Nice to meet you.
Nice seeing you again, Mr. Wolfsheim.
Gatsby?
Mr. Carraway? Interesting man, isn't he? He's a gambler, you know. Fixed the 1919 World Series.
Fixed it? But shouldn't he be in jail?
They can't catch him, old sport. He's a very smart man.
Ah, Carraway, where have you been? Dazed and furious, you haven't called.
Ah, Mr. Buchanan, I've been busy. I'd like you to meet my friend, Mr. Gatsby. Where'd he go?
Back in Louisville, 1917. I was walking along the manicured lawn of Daisy Fay's house. She was 18, 2 years older than I, and one of the most popular girls in town. She was dressed in white, and all the young officers used to call on her. Day and night, the telephone rang and rang for Daisy. Well, one morning, she was sitting out with a young lieutenant I'd never seen before that day. They were bewitched by each other's presences, and Daisy didn't even see me. I learned the lieutenant's name was J. Gatsby. I didn't even realize until recently that the man I had met on Long Island was the same one. Well, soon after, I got a beau of my own and began to play seriously in tournaments and fell out of touch with Daisy. When I returned, I heard only of rumors of how her mother found her packing a bag to follow some young soldier overseas. Daisy, naturally, was furious and fell out of speaking terms with her family for a time. But by autumn, she was fine again. It was only on the eve of her wedding to the rich young Tom Buchanan that I ever heard of the soldier again. I was a bridesmaid and found her drunk in her room with the letter in her hands. I asked her what was wrong, and all she could get out is Daisy changed her mind. We fixed her up that evening. She married and left for the honeymoon as Daisy Buchanan.
What an odd coincidence that it was the same Gatsby all that time.
It wasn't a coincidence. He moved across the bay and threw all those parties in hopes that he'd see her, that she'd wander into one of his parties one day. He wants you to invite her to tea tomorrow.
Well, why didn't he just ask you to arrange it?
This is right next door, and he wants her to see his house.
I suppose there are only 4 types of people in this world. There are the pursued, the pursuing, the busy, and the tired.
She ought to have this opportunity in her life.
Does she even want to see Gatsby?
He absolutely does not want her to know. You're just supposed to invite her to tea at your place.
I wrote the script and included a couple quotes just to characterize each of the characters and to explain the plot a little bit better. The first quote we included as a voiceover at the very beginning of our video. We had 2 kind of detached voices saying that he's a bootlegger, and one time he killed a man who had found out he was nephew to von Hindenburg and second cousin to the devil. I included those just because it kind of shows what rumors were circulating about Gatsby and how people were really judging him without really knowing him. The second quote I included like verbatim from the book was one of Nick when they were driving over the Queensboro Bridge, and it was, anything can happen now that we've slid over this bridge, anything at all, even Gatsby could happen. This kind of shows the kind of elusive nature of Gatsby's like real personality and the kind of overdone nature that he kind of puts on as a show and as a front. The third quote we had was, there are only the pursued, the pursuing, the busy, and the tired. And this is definitely what we talked about today in class, or when we were talking in class. It shows basically the caste system that existed in New York at the time, and how the pursued were basically the old money and East Egg. The pursuing were like the West money and people who were trying to become that East Egg mentality. And the busy and the tired were basically like the Valley of Ashes people and the people who were working their lives away. And those are the quotes we included.
We chose to incorporate the car scene with Gatsby and Nick into the film because we thought it was a very important kind of turning point in Nick's paradigm of Gatsby. Nick has been kind of secretly infatuated with Gatsby's mystery because he doesn't really know where he's come from, how he got all this money, why he's throwing these parties. And so they're in the car together and Nick says, well, what's your past? Tell me about yourself. And then Gatsby's talking about how he's supposedly from Oxford, about how he fought in the war, how even Montenegro gave him this medal that he has to show. He has a picture from his Oxford days. And Nick is kind of perplexed because really who has all those mementos? And he just kind of feels that Gatsby isn't quite telling the truth. And Nick kind of mirrors that with a little bit of discomfort that we thought was very important to include in the film.
We included the part with Wolfsheim to show Gatsby's past and how he gained his money, and it also shows how Gatsby's money scheme is very illegal and inconspicuous and sketchy, so it leads you to think that Gatsby isn't the person that he seems to be.
So we included the excerpts of Daisy and Gatsby outside and on his car because it shows their past relationship and just how they interacted with each other. And we included the part where Daisy is reading the letter just to show how conflicted she was with her feelings because she was supposed to marry Tom the next day, but she just got this letter from Gatsby, declaring his love for her, saying that he was still alive and that he had money now and she didn't know what to do.
We included the date scene between Nick and Jordan to show that their relationship was beginning so that it would be normal that they'd be on a date together at a tea house. And then also to show that Gatsby had this big scheme underlying everything. So these parties weren't really what they seemed. They were a scheme to get Daisy to finally come over. That's why he was across the bay, and that's why he gained all of his money, so that he could finally have his lost love, Daisy Faye.
Our group chose to film Chapter 4 for our Gatsby project because Chapter 4 is, when you think about it, a really unique chapter. Not much in Chapter 4 happens in terms of actual plot events, but Chapter 4 gives the reader a really good insight into the backgrounds of a lot of different characters, specifically Daisy and Gatsby. In terms of Gatsby, you find out supposedly that Gatsby's from Oxford, about his war days, etc. And as you notice, Nick is kind of skeptical about that. And then later you find out that he's had some dubious bargains with other people that make you question the legitimacy of this money that Gatsby has. Also in this chapter, you find out some more about Daisy. Basically, in the voiceover, we realize that Daisy does know Gatsby and that they've had a history together. And we see her on the night before her wedding night, and she realizes that Gatsby loves her and she could have had a chance with Gatsby. And she's obviously very conflicted about that. And we thought that was really important to show because Daisy has had to go through a lot in her life. Chapter 4 is just a really important chapter because it sets up a lot of history of all the characters that then kind of culminates towards the end of the book.